Welcome to the Rogue Reader podcast. My name is James, and I love reading Star Wars books.
Hi, I'm Robert, and I'm illiterate.
Hi, I'm Johnny, and I just caught a Jigglypuff.
And for today's episode, we're going to be covering the first book in the Young Jedi Knights series called Heirs of the Force. This is a young adult series starring the children of Han and Leia, Jacen and Jaina Solo, as they learn to become Jedi at Luke Skywalker's Jedi Academy at Yavin 4. It spanned 14 books, and while the events of them are not galactic scale events, they're still really important to the development of these characters. Going back to this series, it does give me goosebumps. These characters are going to go on to become main characters in future Star Wars novels, shaping pretty much everything that is to come. But you get to experience them growing up, and it all starts here. The most similar comparison I can think of for you guys to relate to is it's probably the same feeling you get when you start over a big anime and you know all of the big arcs that are going to come up and everything these characters are going to do, but you're just watching them when they first start out. That's kind of like the same feelings I get going back to these books here. This book is also really important to me because it is the first Star Wars book I ever read, or should I say had read to me. My mom read this to me when I was a little kid. I have an uncle who's a big sci-fi nerd, and he had the first two of these books, and he gave them to my mom, and she would read them to me at night. So it was my first exposure to anything that was continuing Star Wars stories happening outside of the films. The fact that books like this existed kind of blew my mind. I would look at this cover and be like, wow, that's Han and Leia's kids, I do want to point out while I talk about it how cool I think this cover is. It's like, I think, Robert, you'd mentioned a little bit off screen how it's like kind of holographic.
Yeah, it's holographic edition. Look at that.
All these covers are
It's pretty cool.
really cool. Credit goes out to the cover artist, Dave Dorman, who did the covers for these series, as well as a lot of Star Wars comics. And this is that original book, by the way, that my mom read to me. So this is a very old book.
Yeah, I could tell.
We keep my water away from that.
But yeah, I grew up with these guys, which is why I love the characters of Jacen and Jaina so much and why they're so important to me. So let's go ahead and get into it. All right, just to start with some background information, these books were written by author Kevin J. Anderson and his wife Rebecca Moesta between 1995 and 1998. Kevin J. Anderson is a really important author when it comes to Star Wars. Being among the first, he really helped establish a consistent canon. His first Star Wars work was the Jedi Academy trilogy, which involved Luke rebuilding the Jedi Order. He also worked with Tom Veitch on the Tales of the Jedi comics, which take place thousands of years in the Old Republic. So he was a pioneer when it came to charting Star Wars eras. When it came to how they split up the books, I guess Kevin was a fan of writing everything involving Jacen and coming up with the type of corny jokes that he likes to tell throughout the books. And his wife, Rebecca, she was a fan of writing for Jaina and showing how much of a mechanic she was. She wanted Jaina to kind of be an inspiration and show that girls can do some of the things that normally are considered for men. They wrote 14 books in the series, and according to an interview, they had a new book that would come out every 3 months. So how Kevin J. Anderson described it is book 1 would come out while they were proofreading book 2, while they were editing book 3 because it hadn't been turned in yet, while they were plotting book 4 because they hadn't even started on it yet. So they had a pretty hectic schedule working on these. And then just for a final bit of background, since we haven't gone over the Jedi Academy trilogy yet, just know that Luke set up his Jedi Academy on the temple at Yavin 4, which was the planet that the Death Star attacked in the first movie. And he's using the Rebel base as his Jedi Academy. And Jacen and Jaina are 14 years old in this series. So the book opens with Jacen in his room in the Yavin 4 temple. He is admiring and feeding his many pets that he has collected in cages built by his twin sister Jaina. He notices one of his pets, a crystal snake that is near invisible, had escaped its cage. So he goes to Jaina's room to ask her for help in finding the snake. We see that her room is cluttered with all sorts of machinery. Jaina is working on something that can help provide power to the temple, and Jacen convinces her to help him look for his pet snake.
I was gonna say, like, Jaina's gonna be like, "Look, Jacen, I gotta freaking fix this power generator. I can't help you with looking for your little snake. It's invisible. It's still there. It didn't escape. It's just trying to trick you to open the gate."
Jacen and Jaina's characters, they're established pretty well in this opening chapter. Jacen's all about animals and nature, and he has a talent for using the Force to connect with animals. Jaina, meanwhile, is all about machines, just kind of more aligned with her dad. She likes to work or piece together pretty much anything that she can get her hands on. And as they're wandering the halls, Jason senses the snake in the room of another student called Raynar Thule. Creeping inside, they see Raynar sleeping, and Jason can sense that the snake is sleeping underneath his robes. So Jason and Jaina decide to work together to get the snake. They use the Force together so they can slowly lift Raynar off of his bed. Jason then grabs the snake, and he's using the Force to calm its thoughts. But Jaina can't handle lifting Raynar by herself, so she just drops him on the floor. And he wakes up suddenly, and they make up a story that they found him already on the floor, and that he must have been so tired that he not even make it to his bed.
Gaslighting on another level.
Raynar Thule is described as he's basically like a prissy rich kid. He wears expensive robes, he's condescending, and he seems to always question Luke's lectures. Jason makes it clear that he doesn't like him much, and Raynar will continue on as a side character throughout the novels. Nothing really important at this stage, but he does play a very important role in the series at a much later date, so just keep him in the back of your mind until we bring him up again. As they leave the room, Jason does get a little cocky, and he waves goodbye to Raynar using the hand that has the invisible snake wrapped around it.
Nice.
After returning the snake to its cage, Jason and Jaina, they quickly get ready so they can head to the assembly chamber with the other students for a lecture to be given by Luke Skywalker. We get an insight on the temple and how Luke believes that everyone can learn from each other, so everyone is welcome at his temple. He has trainees that are really strong in the Force, and he has others that are very weak in the Force, but are content to just essentially be historians, but he welcomes everyone. And we learn that Jason and Jaina stay at the academy for part of the year. Their younger brother, Anakin Solo, is with their mom on Coruscant, but he would be joining them at the academy soon. He's gonna get old enough to join pretty soon. We meet our next main character of the series and friend to Jason and Jaina, Tenel Ka. She is from the planet Dathomir and is described as being humorless. She always keeps things straight, and she's very big on physical training, believing in using the Force only as a last resort. As such, when we're first introduced to her, she enters the assembly chamber through a skylight in the ceiling, so she scaled the whole temple and uses a grappling hook to descend down.
She couldn't just use the stairs or something?
Or, the Force.
They didn't have a Force elevator or something?
Like, we could all do that. Not sure.
They should have saw her, just glapping up. Like, they already saw her coming up and everything. They're just looking, just waiting for her to come up.
We can all sense you.
Well, remember, she doesn't believe in she only wants to use the Force as a last resort. She wants to show off, how strong she is. That's kind of her thing.
Classic Dathomirian.
Well, to give a little backstory on her, she's actually royalty. Her mother, Tenenil Dejau, she became the queen of the Hapes Consortium when she married Tenel Ka's father, Prince Isildur. I'm sure a lot of this might be confusing if we haven't gone over that book yet, but...
Sounds like Isildur from Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I think it's pronounced Isildur, but...
Isildur.
I could be mispronouncing that.
Cast it into the fire!
Her mother is originally a witch from the planet Dathomir, and in the novel The Courtship of Princess Leia, that's the novel where essentially she meets Tenel Ka's father and they get married. So that's a story for another day, but essentially because the Hapes is a matriarchal society, Tenel Ka is going to be the future ruler of them one day. But she hasn't told the twins this, and she tends to favor her Dathomir heritage over her Hapes heritage. She is a very important character, and she is also the future wife of Jason.
Well, I mean, not to say anything, but I'm me as Jason. I'm technically Nabooian nobility from my grandmother's side.
Well, his mom was a princess, so.
But also, Padme was also Queen of Dathomir, so
he's got a lot in him.
There's some royalty.
Still some royalty, tension there.
I have a couple pictures of Tenel Ka, but this is one of what she looks like when she's younger.
Okay.
So she's you can tell she's kind of like that warrior woman motif.
Yeah. And that's from Dathomir.
So
this is the picture. This is a picture that comes to my mind when I think of her. I don't know why. I must have seen this book somewhere. But
it's definitely different from Dathomir, from what we depicted nowadays.
Yeah, because the Dathomir witches are definitely.
She did not look like that, in the games.
No. Well, and actually, as a brief aside, she's from a clan that's called the Singing Mountain Clan. In the book that introduced the witches, there are good witches and bad witches, essentially. So she's from the good side. Disney Star Wars canon hasn't introduced any of the good witches. They're all Night Sisters.
That's why she's not ugly. Only bad witches are ugly.
Only bad witches are ugly.
No, those are the bad witches, I swear. You can trust me.
The twins, they have a challenge where they try to make Tenel Call laugh because of how serious she always is. And Jason is telling corny jokes throughout the entire book, but I'm going to make you guys suffer through them as well. So he tells he tells Tenel Ka, what do you call a person who brings a Rancor its dinner?
Man, I got it.
Lunch.
Close, the appetizer. Tenel Ka is not impressed.
I thought he was going to open with, like, did you see freaking we made some guy believe that he fell asleep he fell down in his sleep?
Knock, knock.
Raynar's like, what? Luke enters and he begins his lecture. He tells the story of a former student of his named Brachus. He states that when he first opened his Jedi Academy, the Imperial Remnant tried to send infiltrators. Brachus was one of them, and Luke could sense it in him the moment they first met. But he also sensed that Brachus had great potential. So Luke decided to train him anyways. If Darth Vader had goodness in him, then so could Brachus. Luke felt he was succeeding in turning him to the light side, and he sent Brachus on a quest that would force him to truly look into himself. And it seems that Brachus failed that test because afterward he just quickly fled, presumably right back to the Empire.
Luke, what a great judge of character Luke was at that point.
He knew the risks, but he ties that to Yoda's teaching of do or do not, there is no try. Basically, Luke says that you could say that he tried to turn Brachus to the light, but instead of focusing on what you tried to do, you should focus on what you did do. So Luke says he showed Brachus compassion, he showed him the light side, and he had him face the deepest part of himself. That was all he could do, and at that point the choice was up to Brachus and not Luke. And this is probably actually one of my favorite parts of the book. Luke's message of focusing on what you accomplish and not what you fail to do is a message that rings pretty true. And just the story about Brachus, it also just serves as a little bit of foreshadowing for the next book in the series as well. But he finishes his story, and suddenly an alarm blares out, and R2-D2 comes racing in, and Luke tells everyone that there's trouble at the landing pad, and Luke quickly leaves, and the twins and Tenel Ka decide to follow him. But everyone else seems to have the same idea, so there's this mad rush out to the door. But Tenel Ka says that she can get ahead faster. She can get them all ahead faster if they climb back up the temple the way she came in and over. So she uses her grappling hook, and the three of them climb. It's noted that Jason could use the Force to help him climb over, but he chooses to do it without the Force so he can impress Tenel Ka. They get to the top, and they see that one of their supply runners is staring white-faced as this huge creature is approaching him from the jungle. I don't have any visuals of this creature, but it's described as having a triangular head with tentacles on it that have eyes at their ends, a shaggy body, and 6 legs. So just imagine that to the best of your ability.
I like Rathars or something from Force Awakens.
I have some Monster Hunter.
Except it's not round. It's like triangle.
Yeah.
That's how I'm kind of seeing it.
Shaggy. Jason, Jaina, and Tenel Ka, they make it down, intent on fighting the creature when Luke arrives. He walks towards the creature, hand outstretched, talking calmly. It stares at him and doesn't move. The supply runner, he runs and grabs a blaster, telling Luke to get out of the way so he can shoot it, but Luke forcefully says no, and he raises the other hand.
It is like Chris Pratt in Jurassic World. Stand down. Stand down.
It kind of is like that a little bit.
A little bit, yeah, and they're all like, what are you doing?
He uses the Force and he like yanks the blaster out of the guy's hands. And he goes to the creature and he just calmly tells it, go, there's nothing you need here. And the creature just immediately turns and flees back into the jungle. And I like this scene because anytime we see a Jedi following Yoda's teaching that the Force is used for knowledge and defense and never attack is always great. If this were, because let's be honest, if this were a video game, we would have cut that thing down as quickly as we could.
It would have been the best raid. Quickly. It would have been the best Monster Hunter raid boss. It'd be like a whole bunch of Jedis flying over with lightsabers.
Afterward, Luke tells Jason and Jaina that their father and Chewbacca are arriving tomorrow, and the twins are very excited to see their father again. The next day, they're waiting for their father, and Jason tells another joke. He asks, do you know why TIE fighters scream in space?
Because they're always tired.
That's better than what his answer is because they miss their mothership.
Zing!
Yours is better, actually. You should write books in this series.
I will.
At least on the joke.
So the Millennium Falcon touches down, and Han comes out giving both his kids a big hug, and Chewie comes out too, just basically picking them both up, giving them like huge Wookiee hugs. They ask what Han is doing there, and he states that he's on his way to help Lando with a new operation in the system. Jason hazards a guess that Lando is building a Nerf ranch, and he needs Han to build a corral, because get it? Nerf herder? But Lando is actually starting a gem mining operation in the gas giant of Yavin. So that big, orange moon in the sky is where he's doing his operation. So Han also mentions that Luke had them stop by Kashyyyk to pick up a new student for the academy. And this is Lobaka, Chewbacca's nephew, who's here to learn being a Jedi. Lobaka, yes.
Very creative.
That's him on the cover. That's the little random Wookiee on the cover there.
Ah.
He's shorter than Chewie, but he's still taller than the twins, and he appears a little nervous. At 19 years old, he's very young for a Wookiee. Chewie takes him to go see Luke, and Han has some gifts for his kids. He has holos with personal messages from Leia and Anakin. He gives Jacen a plant to feed to one of his pets. And for Jaina, he brings her an old hyperdrive generator to tinker with, which she is super excited to get.
Thanks, Dad. I got a plant.
He's actually
Snake.
Jason's actually very happy about the plant because he's happy that his dad actually remembered what one of his pets actually liked. That he took the time to remember.
You
that.
probably saw it like a Costco, like Space Costco, like there's a plant.
Oh, this will look good for my son. There you go.
It's on clearance. Sweet.
Oh, I just picked it up off the ground when I got off the ship. Later, Jacen and Jaina are giving Loey, that's his nickname, a tour of the temple. When they get to their rooms, Lobaka is shown to be very excited by the machinery Jaina has collected. Han translates that Lobaka loves computers. And Jacen and Jaina ask how they can understand Loey when Han is gone. And Chewbacca shows them a small droid called MTD. It basically can clip on Loey's belt, and it's programmed to translate Wookiee. It was created by both Chewbacca and C-3PO. They created it together. And apparently it is fluent in 6 forms of communication and sounds a lot like C-3PO. And I'm just thinking, really? 6? That's all you could do?
Yeah, exactly.
And I was thinking you're going to have like a...
They don't have enough storage in his hard drive or something.
Stephen Hawking. Hello, my name is Lobaka.
It doesn't look... He doesn't look like I imagined him from the book, but he's kind of ugly. That's what he looks like.
Oh, man.
That looks like E.T., robotic E.T. right here in the face.
And he's a belt?
Clearly.
Yeah, it's a belt.
So basically, whenever he wants to beat someone up,
clips on.
beats him.
Jacen, Jaina, and Loey, they all go to have lunch together. Tenno Ka joins them and introduces herself to Loey. Loey says that it's nice to meet her, and in a fun exchange, MTD over-translates to something like, he will be glad to know her every day the sun sets and the moon rises, something really grand like that.
Oh, classic Loey.
And Loey gets mad and tells them, don't do that, which makes sense, because imagine if a translator took liberty with what you said. We get a little variety of the different Jedi students that are here. There's like these plant Jedi that are outside soaking up the sun. We have these like lizard Jedi that are eating freshly hatched eggs in front of them. There's like these bird Jedi that are eating caterpillars.
Don't forget the dragon Jedi. They're the best.
I bet you there is one.
And then we have human Jedi, just regular ones.
Tenno Ka snatches a juice box that was heading for Raynar Thul's table, and she toasts to new friends. But Raynar isn't happy, and he uses the Force to snatch the juice box back. But before he can do anything else, the invisible snake shows itself briefly on his seat, apparently having escaped again. Raynar sees it, and he starts screaming as loud as he can. It shimmers, so it's not totally invisible. So Jacen tackles him so he can try to get the snake, and Tenno Ka thinks this is an attack, so she immediately grabs a plate of food and throws it at Raynar's friends. And soon a food fight breaks out, a Force-powered food fight breaks out, and it's just the students are hurling food everywhere at each other. R2-D2 comes out, and he's trying to shrill loudly at them to get them to stop, but he quickly retreats after they start throwing food at him too.
The Scone Wars has begun.
Jacen manages to get the snake, and then suddenly they just hear a forceful stop, and all of the food just stops midair and hovers, and Luke is standing there basically admonishing them that they couldn't find a better use for their powers. So he tells them, maybe you'll find a better use in using the Force for cleaning up this mess, and then he just waves his hand and all the food just drops midair. But as he walks away, Jacen thinks he can see him smile as he turns around. Up until this point, each chapter would swap between Jacen and Jaina's perspective, but for Chapter 6, we do get to see Loey's perspective for the first time. As the group is heading to the Millennium Falcon with Han and Chewbacca, who are about to leave, Loey is thinking about how uncomfortable he is being on the ground, and he's homesick for the tall trees of Kashyyyk. Wookiees on Kashyyyk live almost exclusively in the trees just because it's too dangerous to live on the ground.
I see how it is. The plant Jedi are going to build him a tree. It's on Loey's clubhouse.
You can live on us. Han tells Loey to help his uncle in the cargo hold of the Falcon, and when Loey gets there, he finds the disassembled pieces of a T-23 Skyhopper, and that's what this little ship is right here on the cover. This is similar to the same speeder that Luke used on Tatooine to bullseye Womp Rats. That was his T-16, so this is a T-23. I guess it's a later model. Loey's excited when he sees it, and Chewbacca lets him know that it's his going-away present for him, and that he just has to assemble it himself, though. The Millennium Falcon leaves, and the group immediately start working on assembling the speeder. Jaina is especially eager because of how much he loves, mechanics and things like that. And they get it repaired, and Lubaka is ready to take it out immediately for a spin, and Jaina asks if she can go with him. Loey really just wants to go by himself for the first flight because he's just feeling homesick, and he just wants to go find some trees somewhere to hang out. But he also recognizes, what Jaina did, so he reluctantly says that Jaina can come. But then MTD translates it as just directly, Lubaka would rather go by himself.
Keep it real, man.
And then Loey just barks at him, and then MTD says, "Oh, all right, Jaina, Lubaka would welcome you to come as well, but believe me that he said it with great reluctance." And then Lubaka just face palms, but Jaina just smiles and said that she understands and she would want to take it by herself for the first time too. So Loey takes the Skyhopper out about half an hour before landing on the top of some trees. He's just lying there looking at the big gas giant above, and he catches a glint of something in the trees some distance away. He can't tell what it is, and he wants to go see, but it's getting late, so he notes its position and decides to check on it tomorrow. Loey arrives back at the temple just as Luke has called a meeting. He announces that something has come up requiring him to leave, so he's leaving the students in the hands of one of his former students, a Jedi named Tion. And Tion is a character that's introduced in Kevin Anderson's Jedi Academy trilogy. She serves mainly as a Jedi historian, and she's kind of a mainstay in Luke's Jedi circle going forward in the series. If you have those kind of classic Jedi Council members you think of in the prequels, like Yoda, Mace, all of them, if Luke had his own version of that, she would be up there right with them. She's a pretty important character. She likes to teach her lessons by singing, so she has an instrument.
I almost thought that was a guitar.
Well, it is. It's a kind of instrument.
Nice.
So you're not wrong. This is another picture of her.
Your music sucks. Shut up.
She's actually in one of the Star Wars Battlefront games where she's chronicling battles of the past, which is pretty cool. Luke leaves, and for their evening lesson, Tion brings out an instrument, and she sings a ballad of the Jedi Knight Voodoo Siosk Bask, whose student Exar Kun ended up becoming a Sith Lord and killed him. The story that she sings of is from the Tales of the Jedi comics, which, as I mentioned, is something that Kevin J. Anderson also worked on with his co-writer Tom Veitch, and they like to make connections to each other's work, so this is just an example of that here. Again, he really kind of pushed for that idea of making sure that there was a cohesive canon in the early Star Wars days. After the lesson, Loey tells Jason, Jaina, and Tenel Ka about the discovery he made in the jungle, and they decide to go take a look in the morning after their lesson. The next morning, they head over, and they all cramp together in Lubaka's T-23 Skyhopper, and when they reach the spot, they begin their search. Loey climbs the trees just to kind of look around, but everyone else, they can't really follow him. They're not as good climbers, so they search the ground. Loey says that the artifact in the tree seems to be a solar panel, and Jason is more excited for all the new plants and animals around him. So he's kind of he's not really looking for whatever it is. He's kind of looking at all the plants and stuff. But he does find a bird's nest, and underneath it is some crash webbing. MTD, meanwhile, is complaining just like C-3PO would, basically telling Lubaka to, be more careful. He's lost count of all of the scratches I've gotten, and he basically sounds exactly like C-3PO.
Well, maybe if you actually translate my things correctly, I take better care of you.
Suddenly, Loey makes a discovery, and he calls the group over, and in the clearing is a crashed Imperial TIE Fighter, and that's what's also on the cover here, the crashed TIE Fighter. As they look over the TIE Fighter, Jason tells Tenel Ka how it must have crashed from the battle with the Death Star 20 years ago. Tenel Ka asks why it's called a TIE Fighter, and Jaina says it stands for Twin Ion Engines. And this is something I've always known, and I'm pretty sure I know that from this book. Because I've just always known that it's Twin Ion Engines. That's why it's a TIE Fighter.
And that's why they scream! Man, this day is going great for them, man. Loey's got trees, freaking Jason's got plants, and now they got a ship for Jaina. It's just everyone's day right now.
It's all coming up, Jason, Jaina, and Loey. Jaina inspects the cockpit closely, and she doesn't find any bones. And she tells the group, she goes, I think we could do it. We could fix this TIE Fighter. and Jason says, I have a bad feeling about this. The group leave in the Skyhopper, and as they do, the surviving TIE pilot emerges from the brush. He's described as having his uniform in tatters, his left arm is twisted in to his chest like a claw, and he's muttering to himself, surrender is betrayal. He heads to the wreck to see what damage the rebel spies caused. Over the next couple days, the bonds between the group grow as they learn to work together as a team to repair the TIE fighter. At one point, Jason tells Tenel Ka another corny joke. What goes ha 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 clunk?
A duck. Space duck.
Why?
Why? Just specifically why?
Quack.
A clunk, but
Clunk.
it's a droid laughing its head off.
Ah.
Yeah, it's not funny.
Okay.
Soon they realize they're going to need the other solar panel that's stuck up in the tree, so they decide to use their assignment for the day, which is to lift something with the Force as a group to get it down. So they work together. Jason and Jaina are using the Force to lift the panel, and Lowy and Tenel Ka are in the tree, and they're securing it basically every couple branches down in case one of them lets go. So it takes them a long time, but they eventually get it back to the TIE fighter, and they're able to reconnect it. Jaina starts to think that maybe she could hook up her hyperdrive her dad gave her to the TIE fighter as well. TIE fighters normally don't have hyperdrives. Jason is also spending as much time as he can exploring the area for more creatures and plants. He's in a bush one day and he finds another crystal snake, and he decides to store it in the storage compartment of the TIE fighter for now, which I think is really cruel. He just kind of locks this thing up in this compartment that
It's gonna be Indiana Jones all over again. Why is
Come
there
out of nowhere.
Oh, that's my pet snake, man. It turns invisible.
But at this point, he's explored all of the bushes around, so he decides to go further away from the group. He comes upon a dirt path that he follows, and he ends up coming upon the camp of the TIE pilot. He kind of sees it, and he realizes that the pilot's still alive. So he quickly runs back to the others, basically yelling that the pilot's still alive, but as he gets to them, the TIE pilot comes out into the clearing with a blaster and basically declares the group are his prisoners.
I can imagine Loey being like, we surrender! And MTV, we'll die before we ever surrender to you.
Lily says we would rather die.
We will rather die than surrender to you. Go ahead, shoot. Shoot me first and leave the droid. That's all Loey said.
Tenel Ka's survival training kicks in immediately, and she runs into the tangled undergrowth. She hears Jason yell to get help, and the TIE pilot starts shooting at her. She changes direction randomly as she keeps running. Lobaka also immediately scrambles up the nearest tree. The TIE pilot tries to shoot him too, but he misses. Loey makes his way across the canopy quickly and back down to the Skyhopper. MTD says that they should use it to get help, but Loey fears it'll be too late for Jason and Jaina at that point. So even though it has no weapons, he decides to fly to the Skyhopper. He decides to fly the Skyhopper back to the twins in the hope of somehow rescuing them. Jason and Jaina try to run, but Jason trips on some tools, and Jaina doesn't leave without him, so they both just hold up their hands and surrender as the pilot approaches. Jaina tries to use a mind trick, telling the pilot to put the blaster down, and Jason realizes what she's doing and he joins in, so both in unison they're saying, put the blaster down. The pilot seems to waver momentarily before again muttering, surrender is betrayal, and firmly holding the blaster again. Jason and Jaina next try to use the Force to yank the weapon out of his hand, but he's holding it too tight. The pilot tells them to stop their Jedi tricks or he'll execute them.
I can just try to see him like holding the blaster as hard as he can, like.
Suddenly, Loey in the Skyhopper comes crashing through the canopy, seemingly intent on ramming the pilot. The pilot takes aim, but just before he can shoot, Jaina nudges his aim with the Force, and the blaster shot, instead of hitting Loey directly on, it hits one of his repulsor engines, and he quickly retreats, but his engines are failing as he leaves. At this point, we kind of jump around to what happens to each person. So Loey is trying to get the Skyhopper as far back home as he can, but the engine stops working and it crashes. So Loey starts rushing through the canopy himself, and in his haste, he fails to notice that the clip holding MTD to his belt comes off, and MTD falls through the branches.
Oh no.
You're not fake.
Loey, oh no. How is somebody going to translate horribly to other people?
He's gonna be going back to the base like, dude, I don't know what you are saying, man. Put your belt back on.
When making his way through the branches, a twig gets caught on his belt, and he removes it, and we get a flashback scene where Loey is reminded of the Wookiee rite of passage he went through on Kashyyyk. For a rite of passage, young Wookiees make their way to the forest lower levels where they need to get the strands of a fiber from a siren plant. The plant emits pheromones that entice prey to touch it, and then that's when it clamps its jaw on the prey and begins to digest it. Normally, a young Wookiee will go with 2 others to get the strands, but Loey had decided to go alone that day. He had worked his way through the lower levels of Kashyyyk and came across the plant. He uses a rope that he brought to lower himself slowly over the plant, and he's able to carefully cut the fibers loose. He has the end of the rope, which is dangling kind of in his mouth. He's holding it up with that. But when he gets the fibers, he's excited, and he kind of like...
Yes!
Essentially, and the rope drops, and it hits the plant, and Loey barely pulls himself up before it can clamp its jaws around his legs. But he ends up using those fibers to make the belt, which he still wears. And I do have a picture of him and his belt. With MTD actually clamped onto it.
Ooh, that is pretty cool.
So basically now he's naked.
I mean, Chewbacca's basically naked.
He has a little ammo belt, so it's not complete.
He has a real belt.
No,
Well, he lost his belt just now.
It covers a lot.
Like, oh, man.
Well, he lost MTD. He didn't lose the belt.
Oh, okay. I thought it was like the whole belt. So.
Back in the present, Loey finally makes it through the clearing and back to the temple. It's night, and he nearly passes out from exhaustion. But he calls an alarm, and Tion and the other Jedi quickly come to him. He's trying to tell them what happened, but just like you said, Johnny, they can't understand him. So he reaches for MTD, and that's when he realizes he isn't there.
So he's like, I do not poop. Just trying to charade it.
One word. Big gun coming.
The
Belt.
next chapter, it focuses on what happens to Tenel Ka. So she's running through the forest, and the screeching of some animal distracts her, and she runs right into a tree. But getting up and getting her bearings, she realizes that she's lost, and she decides to look for a place of shelter for the night before finding her way back to the temple in the morning. She finds a narrow cave and makes her way in. It's getting cold, and she wants to make a fire, but she realizes that Jaina had her lighter. So she's sitting there in the cold, and she's reminiscing about her parents and her heritage, basically all the stuff that I already described to you guys earlier. She is also thinking about how she was the one who chose to enlist as a Jedi herself, and that Luke is the only one who knows that she's essentially a royal. But she does end up making a fire herself by, the classic just rubbing 2 sticks together. And as the fire gets bigger, she suddenly gets attacked by a swarm of reptile-like creatures. They're described as having big wings, 2 heads, and a scorpion-like tail. So she quickly gets out of the cave after receiving several scratches and bites, but the creatures follow her out of the cave, so she has to make a run for it. For the next chapter, we swing back to Jacen and Jaina, who are at the camp. The TIE pilot had cut some vines, and he's basically using them to tie them up. There's a sap that leaks from the vines, and it hardens, so it makes it pretty much impossible for them to get out. He then makes a campfire, and he cuts some fruit, which he feeds to both of them. Jacen asks what he plans to do with them, and all he says is just not determined. Jaina asks for his name, and he says it is CE3K1977. Jaina asks for his name, not his number, and he seems to struggle to remember, and then he finally says that his name is Coral. When it came to the number, CE3K1977, I knew this had to be a reference to something, so I just ended up Googling that number, and what I got was Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which was released in 1977. So it's a little movie reference.
Nice.
It's clear that Coral is a bit brainwashed, or at least he has had nothing else to hold on to all these years except his Imperial propaganda training. Jacen tells him how they're from the Academy, and Coral corrects him sternly that it's a rebel base. They ask him how he got there, and he says he was on the Death Star when it came to wipe out the rebel base. He basically starts spouting all this stuff that the rebels threaten the Empire will save the galaxy, and the rebels must be wiped out.
Jenna and Jacen are like, should we tell him?
Coral tells them how he was in the space battle of the Death Star, and his ship was hit and he crashed on the moon. He called for help, but his superiors told him to stay by the ship and await rescue. But that's when he looked up and he saw the Death Star explode. He said it rained debris, and there were meteor showers for weeks afterwards. And I do like how it wasn't just all nice and happy after the Death Star exploded. Like, it actually rained stuff down on the planet afterwards.
That would make sense. Nobody ever talks about the fallout and everything.
There's a similar thing, I believe, in Return of the Jedi. There's like an end or apocalypse type thing after the Death Star blew up, and I think there's even art of like Ewoks running away from like meteors and stuff.
Of course, because they don't have more pressing threats that happen on that planet. Anyway.
Oh yeah.
Then you have the Super Star Destroyer.
They just really hate that planet.
That's a conversation for another episode. Jaina asks why he stayed all those years, and Coral just snaps, surrender is betrayal. Jason tells him how Darth Vader's dead, the Emperor's dead, the New Republic now rules the galaxy, and the Imperial Remnant only operates in a few systems. Coral doesn't believe him, saying that the Empire is invincible, and the twins offer to take him back to the temple to heal his arm and show him that the Empire is no more. But Coral tells him that instead they're going to fix his TIE fighter, and he's going to return to the Empire a hero for never betraying them. I do find his story a little bit sad because the Empire did come back to Yavin. Like, they were like attacking that planet for a while after the Death Star attacked, and there's a couple of video games where you get the missions where they go back and they try to invade.
Yeah.
So they came back. So they either forgot about him or they just didn't care.
That sounded like that Japanese guy who was in, I think it was World War II or something, one of the world wars, where his plane was shut down and he was in an island, and they found him like many years later, and they were telling him that like the war's over and everything. He didn't know for the longest time, and he was like on an island where there was like people that were there that could have that had the like planes and everything, and they could have rescued him and everything, but he decided he didn't know what was going on during that time, if there was still war, if they would have captured him, if they would have killed him. So he kind of like just stayed away from all that. And then later on, when they actually found him, they told him about the war, and then they brought him back. They showed him, and he saw that the war was over, and he got to see his family after so many years. That's kind of like how I'm seeing like this. Like for the whole time, he was just like living in fear that if anybody was gonna capture him or kill him or anything. So he decided to stay away from people. And
Plus, it did take them 30 minutes to get there by ship, and he doesn't have a ship. So we switch now to MTD, who's stuck in a tree, and he decides the best course of action is to call for help at maximum volume every 45 seconds. All this succeeds in doing those, attracting a group of Woolamanders, and they're described as arboreal social-like creatures. They're basically just apes. And they're very excited at seeing him, and they grab him. And one's about to just smash him into a rock, and MTD just lets out this like cry that startles it, so it drops it.
Witch!
And then another young one just runs up and snatches it, and he's running off into the trees, and the others are chasing him. They all want him. And MTD decides that he just can't take the stress of it all, and he just shuts himself off.
He rage quits.
He rage quit. He powers back on later to find that the young Woolamander is just clutching him as it's sleeping in a tree.
It's my god now. I get the voice box.
So the next morning, Coral wakes the twins, and he cuts free their vines. He takes them to the TIE fighter and tells them that they have to finish it today. Jaina tries to lie that it would be impossible to fix it the same day, but Coral just points the blaster at them and emphasizes today. Jason realizes he must be worried that either Loie or Tenel Call might come back with help, so he's desperate now.
Well, also, he probably heard some screaming. Like, so he's like, oh god, I gotta get out of here.
Every 45 seconds.
Every 45 seconds, exactly.
So like Loie needs help or something.
The twins get back to work, and Coral is just sitting unmoving the whole time watching them, his blaster's pointed at them. Jaina asks Coral who he's going to go back to, and Coral simply states that he's going to report for duty. She asks if he has a family, and he states the Empire is his family. Then she asks if anyone loves him, and he hesitates before telling her just to get back to work. Jason goes to seal a compartment, and he sees the crystal snake he hid inside, but before he can grab it, Coral yells at him to come back into sight. Coral tells Jaina that she's not working fast enough, and if she doesn't speed up, he's going to shoot Jason. I love Jaina's response to this. Jaina just goes, "Coral, you would never do that."
I thought he was gonna try to like. Jason was gonna try to smooth things over with a joke. Hey, Coral, knock. Get back to work.
What do you call a lost TIE pilot?
Unemployed.
He just shoots him.
But Jaina just says, "Never mind. The TIE fighter is done." So Loie, meanwhile, is getting frustrated trying to explain to everyone the situation, but they can't understand him. So Loie runs to the old command center, which is still kept open for communication purposes. Remember, Han was helping Lando with that gem farming operation in the system, so they're still nearby. And Tion quickly understands what he's trying to do, so Loie manages to get Han and Chewbacca on the line. They are able to understand the situation and explain it to Tion. and they say they're on their way back and will be there in 2 hours. So Han and Chewie arrive. Loie goes with them so he can show them where the twins are. And Tion and the Jedi stay behind to defend the temple in case of an attack. And I'm just thinking, really? You can't spare one Jedi to help them out? Your own students, too? But Coral's about to enter the TIE fighter. He has his old helmet in his hands. And he tells the twins that with the hyperdrive Jaina installed, he can finally rejoin the Imperial Remnant. He tells the twins they're no longer useful. Jacen tries to send calming thoughts into Coral, but his brain is too brainwashed for any effect to happen. So they ask Coral what he tends to do with them. He tells them that they were a great help to him and the only company he has ever had, and that he's going to leave them here in the jungle. Jaina cries, "You're just going to abandon us here?" In which Jacen elbows her because, yeah, don't be stupid, girl. He's leaving you alive.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I would think Jaina's just like,
oh
like,
no, you're going to
Jacen,
leave us here. We're no way to get out.
Exactly, like, shut up, Jacen. I know he's going to shoot us if we find out we have a temple nearby.
Coral tells them that they can survive as he did, and that it's better that they're there because his last mission on this moon is going to destroy the rebel base before he leaves. Jacen and Jaina plead with him not to do it, that it's a school now and not a base, but Coral doesn't listen and he takes off in the fighter. Tenno Ka, meanwhile, is rushing through the underbrush, still trying to avoid those winged creatures that are chasing her. She calms herself and she's able to use the Force to guide her as she's running, and it leads her to a tree where the Woolamanders are sleeping. So they wake up and the winged creatures instead turn their attention to the monkeys, and the one that's holding MTD drops him right next to Tenno Ka, so he's very relieved to see her. They wait for the creatures to leave, and MTD is like, "You don't know the ordeal I've been through," and Tenno Ka is like, "Yeah, it hasn't been easy for me either." MTD lets Tenno Ka know that he has directional capabilities and he can lead them back to the temple. They make it back in time just as the Millennium Falcon is there and about to take off, so Tenno Ka sprints at a full run, with MTD just kind of yelling for them to stop and wait for them. The ramp lowers again and they're able to make it inside. Coral, meanwhile, he's barreling down on the temple in his TIE fighter. He's still convinced it's a rebel base, and he does see the Millennium Falcon on the landing strip, but he doesn't recognize it. He figures that the rest of the rebel fighters must be underground in the base, so he plans to level the temple first. Then he's going to shoot the Falcon, and then finally their power generator. So he lines up his sight on the temple, and as he presses the fire button, nothing happens. He tries again, but nothing.
Jason's just like, you don't think we're dumb enough to put the lasers back on, did you?
Well, the system says they're operational, but clearly the twins did something to them. So, in the corner of his eye, he sees a shimmer, and then he recognizes the crystal snake just as it bites down on his arm.
Ouch.
Its fangs aren't able to pierce his gauntlet, but he manages to grab the snake and he jettisons it out the cockpit chute. So this poor snake gets captured, thrown in a compartment, and then gets thrown out of a TIE fighter.
Probably caught by an eagle, space eagle.
At that point, blaster fire starts streaking across the sky, and the Millennium Falcon is now on his tail, so Coral realizes he needs to retreat as fast as he can. Jacen and Jaina are sitting together meanwhile. They're using the Force to try to get a sense of what's happening, and they're also kind of proud of themselves. Jaina because she rigged the readings to look like the weapons work when they didn't, and Jacen because he released the snake into the cockpit. The Falcon is pursuing the TIE fighter. The shots that were fired by Han were warning shots because he wants to know what the pilot did with his kids. So he's yelling at the pilot, what did you do with the Jedi Knights? And Coral just replies, again, he just goes, surrender is betrayal. The Falcon starts chasing him through Yavin, but it's clear that Coral is a good pilot. During the chase, Tenno Ka is able to give Loie back MTD, who's crying the whole time just like C-3PO does in any chase scene. Han yells again, he's like, what did you do with my kids? And Coral replies that he left them in the jungle, alive when he last saw them, but that the jungle is dangerous. He then heads for space, and Han follows. Coral is still dodging all of his shots, and Han's just frustrated. He just pounds the console. He's just like, hold still for a moment. And then Coral does. The ship just stops.
Okay.
Well, yeah. It worked.
So Han locks on, and he fires, and just as he fires, the TIE jumps to hyperspace at the last moment.
Nice.
Han and Chewie are stunned. And Tenno Ka, and that's when Tenno Ka and Loie have to explain how Jaina had installed a hyperdrive, and Han's obviously pissed. He's like, she did what? Because, that wasn't for her to install, just to tinker with. But then he's just like, forget the fire, let's go get the kids. Jacen and Jaina climb a tall tree, and they set a smoke signal, and Jacen's just thinking about how next time they should really let someone know where they're going every day.
Yeah.
The Millennium Falcon comes, and Chewie's able to scoop the twins up inside. There's hugs all around, and they head back to the academy. A few days later, Jacen, Jaina, Loie, and Tenno Ka are working on rebuilding the Skyhopper. The twins ponder if Coral made it and if he found what it was he was looking for. Just then, Luke walks up, having returned that morning. He asks the twins if he can help them with repairing the Skyhopper. He talks about how he used to have one on Tatooine when he would chase down Womp Rats, and the twins have a hard time imagining it, and Luke just tells them that was a whole other lifetime ago. He tells Loie that he's glad he seems to be fitting in, and tells all of them that he is proud that they ended up working really well together. And he says that the life of a Jedi is hard, and they still have a ways to go. He asks if they still want to be Jedi, and the book ends with the group giving an enthusiastic yell. And that's the end of the first book of the Young Jedi Knights series.
And MTV being like, no!
Yes, no! What do you guys think?
I liked it. It was.
It's a good introduction to the two Jaina and
I could definitely
Jason.
saw that like as an episode in a TV series or something like that. I like that, seeing that with the.
It definitely has like a Clone Wars Rebels feel, more of a Rebels kind of thing.
Apparently, there was talk of this being adapted into a series of some sort, but nothing ever came through of it. But I could definitely see that as well.
It is pretty sad with the tragedy of Quarrel he's like fully brainwashed, he's fully committed and everything, and he thinks that everything is still okay with the Empire and everything. And he's probably gonna get like a big, just mind blown when he goes and sees there's nothing there left.
Well, of course you guys lost the war. Coral wasn't there. That's why they call it. That was totally
Did they
Coral.
eventually go on to what happens to him later on?
Yes. So we are going to see what happens to him.
Next time.
For me, I'm obviously a little biased for this book because it holds a lot of nostalgia for me. I do recognize it's no masterpiece. It's a quick, simple adventure with big stakes for the characters, even if it's not big galactic stakes. Like you said, Johnny, its purpose is to introduce who these characters are, and it does that really well. As a kid, it was also fun seeing what it's like at Luke Skywalker's Jedi school. That being said, I feel like adults might find these books a little too simple, but I'll give more thoughts on that when we finish. I want to do these books kind of come in arcs, so I want to do the first arc of these stories, and that's collectively that arc is known as the Rise of the Shadow Academy. So once we finish that arc, that's when I'll give more thoughts on if I would recommend this series or not. But in conclusion, that is it for today's episode. So thank you for joining us on the Rogue Reader podcast, and may the Force be with you.
I give it 5 MTV screams out of 5.
No, yes! Thank you for watching or listening to this episode of the Rogue Reader podcast. If you enjoyed it, please give it a like, subscribe for more content, and share to any other Star Wars fans you think might also enjoy this content. Thank you very much.